Welcome to One News. Today's October 30th, Thursday. This is Shirley reporting to you from New York. We'll now look at U.S. newspapers headline. First, we'll look at Los Angeles Times. Los Angeles Times headline today is Chinese want a piece of action. Beijing, China is probably the best place to look for movie extras. Every day there are hundreds of people lining up outside the gates of the Beijing film studio looking for small roles such as policemen, soldiers, pedestrians, and sometimes even as castrated men, as in the Zhang Yimou's movie The Curse of the Golden Flowers, where he used more than 4,000 extras, including 400 men that are presumably castrated only in the filmmakers' imaginations. Next, let's move on to Washington Post. Washington Post headline is Banks to continue paying dividends. With permissions of the U.S. government, U.S. banks will spend half of the $163 billion from the Treasury Department to paying dividends to their shareholders. Critics questioned about such action as they think the $163 billion should be used to increase lendings, not to pay dividends. If U.S. banks indeed have so much money to pay to their dividends, what is the purpose of getting the money from the government? Moving on to the Chicago Tribune. The headline front page shows the pictures of presidential candidate Obama, McCain, and vice presidential candidate Palin and Biden. With less than a week to go before this historical election, the presidential candidates on Wednesday began making their closing arguments to America. Moving on to the New York Times, as we can see in this big picture showing a store in Las Vegas offers grocery, slot machines, and also, guess what? Voting machines. So you can shop, gamble, and vote at the same time. Early voting has become very popular in Nevada. Moving on to Wall Street Journal. The headline is Fed steps up assault on slump. Central banks around the world are criticizing U.S.'s decrease in its federal funds rate. The U.S. Federal Reserve yesterday has pushed its federal funds rate down to 1%. Questions are being raised about how much lower can the rates go and how well the cuts are actually working. Moving on to USA Today. China listed U.S. athletes as possible troublemakers because of the concerns that some of the athletes will show demonstrations in the Beijing Olympic Games. China has created a list of 9 U.S. athletes and 1 assistant coach it thought might cause troubles at the Games, according to an internal U.S. Olympic Committee email. Soccer player Abby Wambach, whose name was also listed in the list, has referred to the listing as the biggest compliment of her life. She said, "If they're worried about us, maybe we do have some strength as athletes and as people to speak out." Moving on to the Beijing news. In China, more foods are being tested with excessive amount of melamine. Eggs from 4 companies among 3 provinces are tested with melamine. A wine company's corn wine has also been tested with melamine. Moving on to South China Morning Post. In picture, a man is eating a takeaway lunch in front of a big poster. The poster shows a headline news speculating as to whether the Shanghai stock index will reach 5,000 or 6,000 points. Yesterday, the Shanghai stock index has sunk to 1,719 points. And says on the newspaper, the bull market seems like just yesterday. Moving on to the Wall Street Journal Asia. China trims rates again. China's central bank cut interest rates for the 3rd time in 6 weeks to shore up confidence as the country's growth cooled to 9% in the 3rd quarter. That is the slowest pace in 5 years. Last, let's look at Taiwan. United Daily News. Taiwan's former Vice President Mr. Lin Zhan will represent Taiwan as representative of leaders in the upcoming Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation in Peru. Mr. Lin Zhan will be the highest-ranking official to attend the conference in Taiwan's history. China's President Hu Jintao and U.S. President George Bush will also attend the conference. Thank you for watching One News. Today is October 30th. Shirley Han reporting to you from New York.